Welcome back to the CTO Playbook, the podcast dedicated to helping CTOs excel. What if the playbook that built your career quietly stopped working and no one told you? In this episode, I'm joined by Catherine Stagg-Macey, an executive coach who helps technical leaders to pivot from being the smartest person in the room to becoming the kind of leader a company actually needs next. If you've ever felt stuck inside a system you helped build, this is your permission and your playbook to lead differently. Because sometimes the rooms get bigger and you don't. This is a conversation you'll feel as much as you'll learn from. I'm your host, Adam Horner. And as a coach, I help CTOs from startups to enterprises to lead with clarity, confidence, and strategic impact. And before we get into personal pivots, I just want to share something that I built to help you on your leadership journey. If you've ever felt like there's no playbook for being a CTO, then you're not alone. I've been there too, and I hear it every week from the CTOs and tech leaders that I work with and coach. That's why I started this podcast over a year ago, because technology leadership is challenging, and figuring it out alone makes it even harder. Now I've brought everything together under the same platform. The CTO Playbook is a home for this podcast, a growing community of CTOs and coaching programs designed to help you grow as a technology leader. If you think about your leadership journey like a mountain hike, a climb with many routes, then CTO Basecamp helps you build breadth and clarity into the foundations of your role. CTO Elevate sharpens your strategic impact. And CTO Ascent, that's a path you can take anytime. It's your personalized coaching journey designed around your specific needs, whether you're just starting out or already leading at the highest level. Your path, your pace, your playbook. The first CTO Basecamp cohorts are now available to book and will help you as a technology leader to strengthen and broaden your leadership foundations. If you're ready to stop figuring it all out the hard way and start leading with clarity, confidence, and strategic impact, reserve your spot on the cohort that works best for you. You can learn more about CTO Basecamp, CTO Ascent, and what's coming in the near future with CTO Elevate at thectoplaybook.com. But now, let's pivot from mountains to personal pivot points. Catherine, welcome to the CTO Playbook. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for the invitation.
So I kind of introduced you from one of our previous guests, Zoe, who we had a fantastic episode with quite a few months ago now. So it's great to have that sort of connection and continuity. But just for our listeners, I'd love to sort of go through a little bit about you, where you work, who you work with. So just sort of setting the scene, what are the kinds of leaders that you work with today? And what are some of the typical broad challenges that are brought to you by them?
So the folk that I work with are typically sort of technical, what I call technical experts turned leaders. So even consulting tech companies, whatever mix they are, the people who've moved through being the subject matter expert into a leadership position,
right? And
then are struggling to scale because writing code, managing spreadsheets doesn't set you up well for managing people, and so often, and most of us don't get taught how to do that, and so they'll be struggling in some way, and that's kind of my sweet spot, partly because it was my own journey too.
And that's a very interesting point. So we're talking here about then the pivot point from what you were doing before to what you sort of need to be doing next then. And is it sort of a commonality of your customers that they go through a transition, a transformation then? Is that the core of your value essentially?
Yeah, I think when I start working with them, there's usually a degree of skepticism because they've been asked to work with a coach.
Right.
You know, the chairman, the CEO, somebody has said, like, mate, come on, you need this can't continue. And so there's a great degree of skepticism because they're like, well, what could you, like, I'm smart, like, what could you possibly tell me that I don't know? Like, just come along for the ride.
Right. So, but that tells us something. You're often working with highly functional individuals then. Very smart people. Yeah.
Yes, incredibly smart people. And they've been the smart person in the room, and that's what they've got paid for, what they've got recognized for, what they've got rewarded for.
Right.
And so it comes as a great shock to reach a point in your career 10, 20 years in to go, you mean that's not enough? How can that be true? You know, I just applied myself to my smarts to everything else, and it was fine. And so what you'll what I find is the behaviors show up as they're working harder than they were, longer hours, longer weeks, asking the same of their team and burning the team out.
Yeah. Because that's worked for them before.
And it can work in a smallish team and you can get away for it for a period of time. But if you're leading a team of 20, 40, 60 people, that's just not sustainable. So the methods that had worked don't work when you scale.
Absolutely. I mean, you've said before that your clients are often sort of stuck in systems that they've built. I love that line because it kind of describes it very neatly, but just take us inside that. What does that look like day to day for them?
I think of one of my clients, he had something like 25 meetings in a week. Like, what?
That's a busy calendar.
And then working weekends to do the work that he needed to do. And I said to him, like, why do you have, like, what on earth, 25 meetings? Like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I don't trust anyone. Like, I have to be in those meetings to know what they're doing so they don't screw up. Yeah. So essentially involved in the detail because they're not trusting people, just either in general or not trusting people to do it to the level of work that they think is necessary.
Yeah.
And then they're having to do whatever other work they need to be doing on top of that. And if you get underneath that, you go like, oh, how is this working out for you? They're actually quite pissed off because they want to do the more interesting visionary strategic work. Like, what's the 3-year roadmap or plan for the division of the team, whatever it is. Like, there's just no time. There is zero time for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so then they get annoyed that they're like, oh, why am I in this detail? It's because you've created this. You've set this up. And then it comes to the team gets so scared of them. They're like, well, they invite you to 25 meetings because they're like, if they don't, we're going to get in trouble, or it's going to get red penned or told off. Or so, like, you might as well be in the meeting anyway. So then you end up this lovely perpetuating cycle that feels very hard to undo.
Yeah, it sort of creates itself. And as you say, it keeps itself going because everybody else feels the need to keep it going in the same way as well.
Yes. Yeah. Everyone's colluding and all of that. Yes.
This sounds very, very similar to the phrase that I use, which is sort of constant firefighting, where people are sort of jumping from fire to fire and it's everybody else's fires that they're working on,
yes,
rather than their own, really.
And I think it breeds a certain type of heroism that is quite addictive.
Yeah.
So I've called out a few clients saying they are addicted to wearing the superhero cape.
The dopamine hit from fixing stuff.
Exactly. It's like, well, the only person we can have, Adam, you've got to come fix this. You're like, really? Me? Yes. I'm the one. I'm going to put my cape, put my cape in. I'll fly and I'll save the day. But again, you're in the detail, you're firefighting, you're not building anything sustainable. And that behavior is not sustainable in yourself. And you're also then modeling for the team. Like that's the kind of culture we're building. Yeah.
It's very difficult for other people to copy that and make it work.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So one of the things I'd love to do then is just sort of wind the clock back a bit and sort of how did you get here? Because it's a very interesting and wonderful place to be. I love this approach of taking leaders who are, trying to elevate themselves up to the next level. But what was your own journey to that level?
I started out as a programmer because I did a computer science degree because my father said psychology wasn't a real degree.
Right.
No, yeah, he was an engineer. Like his daughter was not going to be doing this, woo-woo psychology stuff. So I think the desire to work with people and the inside of people has always been there. But anyway, so I spent the computer science degree, programming, project management consulting, that kind of standard path. And then in my 30s was managing a European consulting team, like doing very well by all accounts, highest revenue, for the team in the organization, highest employee engagement figures, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, is this it? Like,
so we're recognizing that high performing there, but you were disillusioned with it then? Yeah,
completely. And I was helping, my team and I were helping. We were insurance, and so helping insurers make decisions on the claims, making a claims investment decision, claim system investment decision. And like I just don't care. It's very hard to care about. The world is not going to turn faster or better because we've chosen product A over product B. And so someone said to me, well, what about, I tried studying psychology in South Africa, then I had to redo it again in the UK.
Right.
And then some life stuff happened and I'm like, I can't start again for like the third time. And so approaching 40, a friend of mine said, what about coaching? I'm like, what is this? What the hell's coaching?
So you'd never taken advantage of coaching up until then?
It had never been offered. I didn't know anyone who'd done it. I'd never heard of, I didn't even know what it was. And she said, well, let's go do this weekend course, like introductory course.
Right.
So, we can it's an introductory course. See what you think. And so I went along and woke up on the Sunday morning in the hotel, like crying, going, I found my people.
Oh, wow. So that was a real pivot point for you then.
It was a pivot because now we were talking about like, well, what do you feel? Like, how does this, like, what's your vision? Like, what are you hoping for? Like on top of all the logical, rational stuff that my life had been about for 20 years and my work would have been for 20 years. We're now layering on, not dismissing that, but there's also an and. Like, what do I rationally want versus what do I hope for? Like, what's my heart longing for? Like, and where do we find that intersection? You're like, okay, now this is cool. So in an unusually impulsive decision, I then decided this is what I was going to do. So set on doing the year-long coaching program certification and resigned a year later and started the coaching business. This is 2013.
So that was a strongly pivotal weekend then, absolutely reoriented pretty much everything about you.
And I should say I'm not a crier. So the idea that I wake up at 4 a.m. crying was like, I shocked myself. Like, who is this person? But
wow,
I was moved. Yeah, I was that kind of moved at the core to shake things up.
What a fantastic story. So then I guess you spent a year doing the studies alongside the working. So you put in
I didn't tell anyone.
There.
Yeah, I didn't tell anyone I was resigning, but I ran it concurrently and then resigned when I finished all of the certification thinking that it would be, I knew lots of people in consulting and because I was working with suppliers, large consultancies, product companies, and then also on the insurance side. And I'm like, well, I know loads of people. I'll call them up the day after resign and tell them I'm doing this cool new thing that they should absolutely buy from. And they were like, and it was absolute crickets.
Right. Nobody
because
else
in 2013, I don't think to some degree it hasn't changed a lot. In this country, in the UK, the understanding and the interest in coaching was close to zero.
Yeah. And I find it's worse in technology than in any other areas because there is now a growing acknowledgement, acceptance, and in some cases mandate for coaching for CEOs and for some of the other executive levels. But the CTO, in my experience, is almost always overlooked.
Yes, I think that's true. I think it's different in the US. My understanding and my just talking to folk in the US, it's a CTO is part of that, and it goes further down the organization. Various levels of coaching, various propositions of coaching for different people depending where they are. I think fueled a lot by the Silicon Valley love and a deep appreciation for coaching and the value that it adds. Mentoring,
coaching, therapy. It's a very very strong culture there, as you say, and it is like a big ripple effect coming out from there because I've noticed it all across the US, but then also in some of the other key cities as well. Exactly as you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see that if you do any work in the startup sector here, which you probably do as well, right? In the UK startup sector, they're completely on board with it. I mean, they may not have the cash, depending on where they are in the funding. They may not have the cash, but they have the appetite.
Yeah.
But you go to a 20-year-old tech company in this country, like forget it. Because it's still being run by the CEO who wrote the first line of code 20 years ago in Fortran.
I didn't have coaching, so why should you have coaching kind of approach?
Yes. Well, what is this coaching, not, malarkey, like what for? Like it's all fine, Yeah. But there are other sectors who are much more open to it. And the big four, the consulting, I do a lot of work in professional services and consulting. It's again, I think influenced by the US holding companies. The big four are much more open. Well, not more open. They invest heavily in coaching across various levels of the organization. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and talking about those pivoting moments, because I absolutely love your story there about that the magical weekend that changed your life. My pivotal moment wasn't anything quite so dramatic, but I was working at Palantir at the time. So again, involving the US. So Palantir, Silicon Valley based company, growing like hotcakes at that point, growing so fast. And I was in a kind of situation where I was kind of a bit like how you described, trying to get things done, trying to get up with the way of working of this role of forward deployed engineer, which isn't really defined anywhere else. And I was trying to basically dig through it on my own and digging myself deeper and deeper. And the shift for me came from being put on a PIP, performance improvement plan. Yeah, exactly. Most of us think, oh my goodness me, that is the Teflon chute to getting fired, right? But it was a very supportive process there. And that turned out to be one of the most supportive coaching experiences that I've had in hindsight. Although it wasn't called coaching or mentoring at the time, it was a performance improvement plan. You shall improve your performance, and here's the plan to do it. So I ended up working with quite a lot of the other folks from the head office, which being the Hobbit themed company that it is, because the Palantir is the Seeing Stones and Lord of the Rings. That was called the Shire. So a couple of people from the Shire came and helped me to basically get through the workloads and pick up the skills and knowledge I need. And that for me was that sort of analogy on that side of it.
But isn't it a great shame that it has to get to that place, right? That it has to get to, I mean, in your case, PIP, in the case of some of my clients, the amount, I'm going to do this one day as an exercise, the amount of medication that people are on for, blood pressure, heart medication, stress, antidepressants, anti-anxiety. And I'm like, this is, like, I'm not a trained therapist, but it just, I have experience of that, of medication, that kind of stuff. It's like, this feels like we've taken it too far. Like, it's gone on for too long. Yeah. I'm not saying coaching is going to get you off the meds, but we could have prevented you getting to that place. I'm delighted that your story ended up being a happy ending, a good ending in the end.
Yeah, it kind of breaks the mold of most stories about performance improvement plan, to be honest. But I think that the key and the commonality, whether it's sort of, crying at 4 o'clock in the morning when you're not a crier, or getting towards the shock and horror of having a PIP when you think it's not, something completely different than it actually is. It's that common theme of hitting a rock bottom moment, really. What somebody once described to me as a kitchen floor reset. That's when you're sort of crying at home on your mother's kitchen floor, sobbing your heart out. Does it actually need to get to that point? Do you almost is it such a strong commonality amongst your clientele against the people who end up in the situation where they're sort of either pushed or realize that they've got to turn something around? It's
more common than I'd like. And I think it goes back to, I think there's probably similarity between you and me, where the smart people are like, well, I'll always work this out. Like, I'll read a book, or I'll watch a TED talk, or I'll look across the organization and see what other people are doing.
I'll look it up on Stack Overflow. Yeah.
Yes. It's like the solution. There has to be a solution out there, and it's not inside, because all the other solutions have been air quotes out there in the environment. They're not inside me. And I don't like to say the problem is inside me, but the way I see the world is never seen as part of perhaps the challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is it. It often takes, I think, an outside perspective to understand where we're at, doesn't it? Yeah.
I think it from someone who you trust, like your boss, the chairperson, who's like, just pulls you aside and like this isn't okay. Like, I'm worried about you. I'm worried about the 80-hour work weeks you're doing. I'm hearing feedback from one CEO was getting feedback from the staff had gone directly to the chairperson to complain about her behavior. And, like, that's quite extreme.
Yeah. Now that's the moment when somebody else brings you in. But there must be some moments when you end up coaching others before they get to that point. Are there any sort of early warning signs you help people spot? I mean, you mentioned medication. That's a fairly obvious one. But are there any sort of easier to spot or less drastic points, perhaps not yet past the point of no return, almost, if you like, where somebody like you can help spot and point out you're not on a comfortable path yet?
Well, I think we can help it at all parts of the path. It's about whether you can see it or not. So yeah, okay. So let's take it down the path. On the one end of the continuum, it's people around you tapping you on the shoulder and doing an intervention.
Yeah.
HR, CEO, chair, whatever it is. I think the signs before that are hard to spot because you're not looking for them because you've never been there.
Right. You don't know what you don't know, effectively.
Yeah. When your partner's like, you're never home, and when you are, you're on the laptop the whole time. What the heck? Yeah. So there will be signals. You'll just be overriding them.
Yeah. And I think that's the key point. We tell ourselves it's all right. This is normal. This is what I've always done. This is how I've been before.
Yeah. When the dog stops recognizing you because you're never at home, when you've got so many flyer miles that you can fly the entire family around the world and not pay and just use the flyer miles, like you're probably in. None of those alone are absolute signs, but I mean, yeah, those are the sort of signs of you're cancelling all your one-on-ones because you don't have time.
Yeah, big red flag.
Yeah, because you haven't got time for this. Your one-on-one's not important for me. I need to do this thing, or there's a crisis that I've got to go save. If 90% of your work is crisis work and you're not bought in as the crisis person, like what are you doing? If you're working 80-hour work weeks consistently, what are you doing? Like, you're not 25 anymore. You shouldn't be doing it when you're 25 either. But I can tell you, when you're 45, your body's gonna, this is gonna punish you. And we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be. I don't think any of us should be working 80-hour work weeks consistently.
No, there's always going to be a crunch time, but crunch time should be followed by time of peace.
Yeah.
So adding together several of these warning signs then would be the point where we sort of should be triggering a bit of reflection. But what you're saying is, people regularly push aside those concerns and override their own conscience or their own warning signals to just keep pushing until what? Some sort of breaking point, some sort of either an intervention from somebody else. And it always looks different from the outside, doesn't it? Because when you're inside, you can justify it yourself. You're kind of okay. It gives me this mental image of what's that cartoon? It's Wile E. Coyote, isn't it?
Yes.
And the road runners sort of sprinting, and the coyote kind of ends up running and still running, even though they're off the edge of the cliff.
Yes, but because he doesn't know, he's still suspended in the air, but we can all see that there is no ground underneath him. Yeah.
And it's that moment of disbelief when everybody else looking at you going, what? And the person's going, no, I'm fine, I'm still running. That's that moment, isn't it?
I think it is that moment. I think what frustrates me a lot, one of the things that really frustrates me about corporate culture in all the organizations I work with, is the lack of willingness to give people feedback. Like, we are so rubbish at hard conversations. And so I'll hear I was really worried about him, but I didn't want to say anything because he was quite stressed, So there'll be people sitting around you with like half an eyebrow raised going, yeah, but maybe now's not, like, he's a bit snappy. So maybe now's not the time to give her or him the feedback that we worried about him, or I don't know how to say it. I don't want to upset them.
And it becomes endemic, doesn't it? Because it sort of ends up being a cultural baked in quality. And so therefore what other people see and copy, they're not giving feedback, so why should I give feedback to this other person I can spot over there? If they're not, I don't have a role model to copy of doing that.
Yeah. And I mean, even like, let's take your PIP. I mean, did you get any signs? Because PIP is a final intervention on the part of HR. There were lots of people involved prior to that, before HR got involved, who were like, something's not right. Like, this is not going the way we want to without him. Like, how many conversations, how much feedback did you get in advance of that PIP that gave you the signs of something?
From memory, I think it was 2. So it was literally, this is the third strike. And both of them were on a very, very similar topic. So I responded to those by just working harder. Exactly as you said, I was still sprinting when I was off the edge of the cliff, and I just didn't know it really, basically. So yeah, and I feel lucky that I got a good intervention in that scenario.
You were very lucky in that. Yeah.
But it was that moment of, okay, I've been told, given the warning sign, but haven't responded to it in the way that was wanted or expected or predicted. And in my case, I think it's because I didn't have a pattern to follow. I didn't have a role model of what good looked like. Mm-hmm. And so I struggled to do better than I was because I couldn't see a better version that didn't involve just pedaling faster, essentially.
Because I think we look around and go, well, everyone else seems to be doing all right. Like, how is everyone else coping? No one's got a lighter workload than me or a worse team than me. Like, why is it? It's got to be me. So I understand the calculus. I understand that. It makes me think of, and there's also other pressures. It makes me think of he wasn't a client of mine. He was managing someone who was on his path to a PIP and had been told by the doctor that he had DVT and to not get on a plane. There was a sales opportunity. He's based in UK, sales opportunity in Japan. This guy got on a plane and went to the sales opportunity.
Against the medical advice. Crazy.
Against the medical advice. And at which point I was saying to my coachee, was like, you now have liability issues here as an organization. Like, go talk to HR about that. But I mean, that aside, I had to think into myself, like the person who got on the plane, like, what was he feeling that he would jeopardize his health he he's potentially putting himself on the path of the stroke for the sake of performing. So he was on a sales plan that he wasn't meeting. He had family obligations and all that kind of stuff. Like he'd been told that he was on the path to being let go if he didn't sort it out. Like the stakes were incredibly high.
Yeah.
So the decisions we make in those moments can seem rational to us and to the outside, to everyone else. Like, what on earth are you doing? But this balance of like, yeah, but I need to, I can't lose this job. I've got my obligations. Maybe it won't happen. Maybe I won't have it. Maybe it'll be all right. I'll just take the blood thinners and it'll be okay. I mean, it really stuck with me that somebody would, I was quite,
it's a very moving image, isn't
shaken.
it?
I was quite shaken by that coaching session. Even though it was fourth hand, but about what we create in terms of a culture, about how did and I had to ask my client, like, what if, how have you colluded in creating the circumstances where he thought that was okay?
Yeah.
Because he's not acting in isolation here.
No, and it's probably a pattern that he's following from other people around him, and the pressures on him are probably not just on him. They're probably similar pressures on other people as well. So,
and to your point of modeling, like, where am I seeing it being modeled in a healthy way to do something else other than suck it up and get on a plane and potentially kill myself?
Yeah, and that always starts at the top.
Yes,
leadership starts with leadership.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit through the pivot then. So when somebody's on the other side of this, of the pivot, of the life-changing moment where they've sort of looked in the mirror, got a few new examples, and they've moved on their way, things obviously calm down. But that process of going through the pivot, in my experience, it can be anything from, like you, a light bulb moment of a 4 in the morning moment, all the way through to weeks of grinding effort to change and update before you sort of realize, I'm around the corner now. Is there a commonality to the key things that people do to get out of those situations when they're putting themselves at risk effectively? This
is the hard part of coaching that you know well, because we're getting down to identity transfer. This is about identity. Like,
right.
Who am I if I'm not the hard worker? Who am I if I'm not the person who wears the cape? Who am I if I'm not the reliable guy? Who am I if I'm not the person who says yes the whole time? And am I still worthy? Do I still belong? Am I still safe? So, people come to me and go, well, I've tried, I know I say yes to too many things and I've tried to say no, but it doesn't work. I'm like, of course it doesn't work because you haven't addressed the underlying assumptions and beliefs and worldview that you have. I watched a TED talk. I'm like, well, how did that work out? It's like, well, lasted a week. Of course. I'm like, yeah. That's why you're sitting here. It's sort of painful. It doesn't have to be painful. It's very soul searching work to go like, what is it? What is my identity? How has that been shaped? And how is that serving me or not serving me? Because, if they're working with you and I at this point, it isn't working in the way that they want it to work. Yeah.
Yeah.
That great line of like, what got you here is not going to get you there.
And it's very foundational, isn't it? That the people need to change literally not only their direction, but who they're expressing themselves as.
Yeah. There's a lot of anxiety. There are patterns that we have developed because of the environment that we're in. We can talk more about that, but it's very much, I use the whack-a-mole analogy, like all your behaviors are driven to reduce the level of anxiety you feel in certain situations. So I have historically been a people pleaser.
Right.
And so harmony in all situations was absolutely mandatory for me. Everyone had to get it like me and get on with each other, which would mean for me to feel comfortable. And if I felt uncomfortable, then I'd be orchestrating. If I felt that anxiety of like, oh, this feels a little dangerous, then I would move things on or step over things or just say yes to appease people, even if I wanted to say no. Whereas the work that I've done is realizing that I'm still a valuable human being if I say no. Like that harmony in a room is not entirely dependent on me.
Right. So it's making all of those unconscious decisions, the unconscious behaviors conscious so that you can see them, look at them and override them when you feel like you want to or need to.
Yes. Yes. And to take me as the example, I grew up in a very emotionally distant family.
Right.
With lots of undercurrents in the house and I'm an only child as well. And so I can remember back growing up like you'd walk in the house and go and sort of sense in, like not just like literally sense in the body, like what am I stepping into? Like, who's pissed off with who, you know?
Oh gosh, so very, very adult level politics from a young age then.
Yes, and then adapt accordingly. And so it made me a very amenable child. The strength in that is I'm really good at reading people. I'm really good at reading rooms. I'm really good at reading teams. When I get triggered and it becomes an overplayed strength, then I just give away my power. I'm like a labradoodle going, yes, you know, Labrador. Yes, whatever you want. You know, pat me. I'm a good girl. Right. And I know it's because I've done the work. I now know that there are certain people who, and circumstances that set that off. So people with power over me. So potentially a big sponsor who has sign off over a large piece of work that I might be doing. People who are very emotionally distant because they remind me of my emotionally distant parent, and I can't read them. Like I can't.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah. It's like, is this landing? Is this not landing? Like, and then I find myself sort of getting drawn into like acting up and being more demonstrative to try and get any sort of response out of them.
To get the cues so you can figure out where you stand.
Exactly. And so I know the circumstances and the people, and they're increasingly rarer as I do the work. But then I can feel myself and my body's going into that place. And I do feel like I'm elaborate, like for people not watching the video, like I have my hands up like I'm sitting on my back paws, in the best sit position I could possibly do. It feels it's very in my body, the sort of leaning forward in a appeasing kind of way.
A physical motion, yeah.
And then I'll know I will agree to nothing in those situations. That's the final, because at that point I'm triggered, and at that point I know I mustn't commit myself to anything. So right. This has been a great meeting, Adam. Let me think on this. I'll come back to you tomorrow, because I know that if I step away from the situation, if I have a good night's sleep, I can find my way back to my full, adult self.
Yeah. So you figured out your unconscious sort of default operating system.
Exactly.
You figured out the danger zones, and now you defend yourself from actions in those situations.
Exactly. And I've done a lot of testing. I do a lot of, and I do this with clients. Like when you realize you have this assumption that if I'm not nice to everyone, people won't like me, and therefore I will never get any business. Let me just make that up as an assumption. Yep. You can go and test that, in a small, easy way. And I usually have people testing, like speak up in a meeting and see, like, how did you feel before? What happened during? What happened afterwards? Did the thing that you think, did the fallout you thought was going to happen? No. So then you start building a book of evidence, because this assumption that I baked in early on years ago if it has a hold of me, I treat it true 100% of the time.
Right.
It might be true 10% of the time. And so we're trying to reclaim that 90% of like, well, it's not, I've got a lot more runway than I used to think I had.
But it's about testing that, generating new evidence.
Yes.
So you can narrow it down to just that 10% rather than letting the sort of the default belief override all those other 90% situations as well.
And this is the difference between watching a TED talk or reading a book. It's like, working with a coach has you go, tell me a meeting the next 2 weeks where this situation might arise. Oh, I've got a sales meeting next week, and the guys are, I really just can't read. Okay, great. Okay, so what are you going to do in that meeting that would test this behavior that you fear would happen? Well, I might do this. Okay, fine. Write down before, during, and after. And I say it's the point here is not that you do it successfully and like tick, nailed that. I'm going to do that like that for the rest of my life. It is about collecting the data and like service pack upgrade for the operating system, right? Like that's where we're at. It's just like we're just little upgrades to the operating system. I have been in situations where I thought they were true and it wasn't. There's a bit more space. There's a bit more freedom.
And that space and distance is another thing that you mentioned a couple of times now as creating distance. And so what does the creating distance actually look like? Is it literally just a case of, like you mentioned, the night of sleep between the event you're susceptible versus the next time you think about it and try to make a more objective approach or decision to it? Is it as simple as that?
Well, another metaphor that works is this idea of being on the balcony and looking yourself on the dance floor.
Right.
So if we're unconscious, we're on the dance floor getting bumping other people, stepping on our feet, tripping over our own feet. We can't see any of that because like we're on the dance floor and head down. And if you can go up on the dance floor on the balcony and look down, you're like, oh my God, I'm doing that thing again. I'm wandering around in circles again. I keep standing on everyone's feet again. That's the distance of that awareness of I can, and the more you do this, the more you can catch yourself in the moment. Like the words come out of your mouth. You're like, I've just done that thing again. Interesting. Okay, now I have a choice. Yeah. So creating the Viktor Frankl quote that you and I both love, the choice lies between, I'm going to misquote it now, the choice lies between creating distance between the stimulus and the response. Like you're trying to create more time between that.
Right. And sometimes it's time and sometimes it's physical space and sometimes it's just a little objectivity.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Powerful. Okay. So this idea of what triggers me then, it's something that I guess each person just needs to figure out and realize, A, that they are being triggered, which is probably the first step. And secondly, what do I tend to do when I am triggered? Because that's the bit you kind of need to recognize and respect. And what I've found is that reducing the time between the reaction happening and when we sort of acknowledge it, observe it, becomes part of being able to create that distance. And it sounds like it's the wrong way around, but acknowledging it quickly means you can kind of go, oh, now that I've acknowledged it quickly, I can do something about it. I can take an action. Whether it's like you mentioned before, thanks for this meeting, I'll have a sleep on it first. But you can take some action to help yourself. So that understanding what it is that you do when you're triggered, so that you can spot it more closely in the moment. And then that can help create a kind of distance as well, can't it? Yeah,
because the trigger may not be a word that many people are that aware of outside of you and I.
It's a behavior essentially, isn't it?
Yeah, triggered means that something inside of you has been set off, like some trap has been tripped, some tripwire has been hit, some bomb has gone off, and somewhere your ego and your psyche is like, we're in trouble. Yeah. Like, we're fight, flight, where our nervous system is being activated in some sort of way. And therefore that's why we talk about there is some somatic response, like there'll be, and this requires a lot of self-awareness, but the change in the breath, the tightening of the stomach, the crunch of the shoulders, the clenching of the hands, like that, there'll all be a version of that you do because some assumption has been stood on of yours. And therefore, I am not safe. I am not worthy. I am not. And therefore, I'm going to defend or protect myself by doing this behavior that I've done for a long time now. Come out the gates punching. Get like super critical of people. Boom. Yeah. Or in my case, very acquiescent, appeasing of people.
Yeah. And it can range across the full range of emotions, can't it? Because I was actually talking to somebody the other day. It was just a 30-minute session, but it was one of those ones that had a massive impact on me as much, I think, as on the other person. Let's call him Bob for sake of argument. And I was having a chat with Bob.
I speak to Bob a lot.
He was basically looking at me for advice. And so he gave me the background on this situation, the technicalities of it, the people that involved, the politics that was going on. And he was, I think, looking for, essentially a variant on the question of what should I do next? And rather than trying at that point, I said to him, whatever I say, it's going to be wrong, inevitably. So instead, I just want to draw your attention to the way that you just spoke to me, because I got him then speaking about what his actual work was. And it was like two different people. He was passionate, he was articulate, he was specific, he was generous, he was clear. And I was like, there's angry Bob who's reacted to all these things and technicalities and politics has happened. And then there's passionate Bob. Whatever it is that you decide to do, I can imagine it's probably going to be better when it's passionate Bob who's making the decision, not angry Bob. And I just said to him, are you aware of when each of those two comes out? And he was almost in tears, actually. It was only 30 minutes, right? It was really short. But it was just enough for him to sort of realize, you told me nothing that I expected to hear, but it was the most useful thing I've heard in ages. And he was close to tears. And it's just that very thing of recognizing, acknowledging that there's sort of the emotional state that we don't want to be in, that we react from, and that emotional state where we really would like to be, even if we don't acknowledge it as well.
Yeah, I think there's, first of all, it's a wonderful example of powerful coaching and meeting the person where they are at, not where they think they're at or where that you want them to be at. And I think, people go like, what's the point of coaching? It's because you have a wingman or a wingwoman in your corner like that.
And that's a great phrase. I've actually heard that on your website, don't you?
I love wingwoman. Batman had Robin, you got me as your wing woman. Because I think coaching sees the whole person and allows, there isn't anyone else in Bob's life, in a workplace certainly, that would have mirrored back the emotions, probably because it would have felt too dangerous, or they're out of their depth anyway. Like, it's not, I'm not saying anyone's not doing their role. It's no one else's role.
Yeah.
But that powerful mirroring is such a beautiful example of great coaching. And I think, yeah, anger is a great sign. Like, if you're angry, like something's going on, like you've been hooked in some way. It could be around values, which are, it's a whole nother different form of coaching, or it could be that something else has been triggered on. So, take the environment that we've grown up in really shapes us. And for me, I grew up in apartheid South Africa in the 70s and the 80s. So if you're looking for like what leadership looked like, it looked like a bunch of old white men shaking their fingers at the screen, usually yelling, usually quite a high pitch, like, right?
Right. You must kind of words.
Yeah, thou shalt, you must. I went to a Catholic school. It was like thou shalt, like literally written in the rules, that thou shalt wear a skirt at this length and hair at this length, right?
So, I don't even see that in legal text anymore.
We were still doing Latin. And so, the water I was swimming in as leadership is very top down, very hierarchical. Everyone else up knows what I need to know. I don't argue upwards. And, in South Africa and apartheid, arguing could end you up in jail or dead. So, these things shape, and I've worked with quite a few Romanian clients at the moment, and, we compare growing up under communism and growing up under apartheid, and we can both see in each other, like, this is why autocratic, authoritarian leadership can be quite triggering for us, because it sends us back to a time where we didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
The world did not feel safe.
And it goes all the way up to the leader of your country. There isn't much bigger role model or more visible a role model to take cues for behavior from.
So if you're under a boss or a culture that is very authoritarian, and you come from that kind of culture, that cultural upbringing, that could be very, very triggering for you. Which may bring out anger, it may bring out appeasement. Like, it's, we respond in different ways, and that doesn't matter. It's like, it's your pattern, it's your operating system. Like, that's the
unique part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's your life's journey to work on. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I think a lot of us tend to do, especially those who come from the tech background, somebody else or other people have sort of got this idea that, coaching fluff, don't believe in it. So a lot of people end up by default going it alone. Can we improve on those blogs and Stack Overflow articles? And, but people go look up for themselves to, if you're going to go it alone and you aren't going to reach out to a coach, can we distill it down into some sort of set of steps that people can try and put in place themselves? Now, because of where it is, I'm going to appreciate that doing it at the time is the wrong time. So let's see if we can scoot it back and go, in those quiet moments before you're sort of, hanging in midair, still sprinting while you're on the edge of the cliff. What do you think that most of us could do to improve on where we're going to be when we do hit that moment where we've got the kitchen floor reset? It
requires a great degree of self-reflection, like what triggers me.
So an awareness of what hits our buttons.
What are the 10 things, if you think back on the last month of interactions at work, where did I get hooked? Where did I get triggered? And what was going on? Who was in the room? What was the politics? What were the dynamics? So to get your version of the trigger, would be a starting place.
And that's very much a reflexive moment, isn't it? To try and figure out what that is, because it's not always simple as sitting down and just going, okay, I'll just write out the 10 things. It's not like writing down the 10 steps to bring a server back online. It is. You're really trying to think about something that's quite emotional in many cases, aren't we?
Yeah, so it's hard. And I appreciate the very premise of the podcast is giving people playbooks to action after listening to this. But the challenge here is like you can't read the label from inside the tin. So you and I are saying like, what triggers you? What are the circumstances? I'm being a good guest here and giving it, but I know that even that is hard to do. Yeah,
it definitely isn't easy. This work.
Yeah, and then you're looking for the pattern. Like, where do I always go? Do I go? And there's sort of 3 broad places you can go. One is complying or pleasing. The other one is protecting. So you'll be critical. You'll be distant. You'll avoid all vulnerability under all circumstances. And the third bucket is controlling. You'll double down on the deadlines. You'll double down on the drive. You'll push and shout at people. You'll raise the expectations around people because, this isn't good enough. So, those will be the three places that you go to because you're feeling under some sort of pressure. You're feeling compromised in some sort of way. And then the question for me is always like, but first of all, know that those are just overplayed strengths. Like if you're complying as your reactive pattern, you're probably really good at relationships. You're just now overplaying it. And that they are survival strategies. They really have worked. Like you wouldn't have got to where you are today if they didn't work for you.
Yeah. So one way to recognize these is when we look back and think, I took it to an extreme there. I took it to another level there in those moments.
Yeah. And my question is then, do you want to carry on working like this? Because you can. But then we're back to like the beginning of this conversation. It's like, tell me about the meds and with the dog that still knows you when you come home. It is one of those pivotal moments of like, how is this working out for you?
Because there was an element of willingness of am I going to evolve from here? Yeah.
And then you said like, do we have to wait until the road runner is off the cliff? Mostly we do, because that is that's the Damascene moment that we seem to have as smart people to drive through our thick skulls of like, something needs to change.
Yeah, to get around the justifications we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
Because there's another thing that you mentioned as well, which was around the environment. And this come back to the patterns, which is that, we've had the environment, maybe perhaps from when we were younger, perhaps from our formative years, or sometimes perhaps just a very influential and strong part of our history. So that something in our background and environment shaped us. And so there is an element of tying back the pattern, whether it's the compliance or the controlling behavior, to a environment, a situation, a formative experience that sort of embedded that for us. And that's part of recognizing it as well, right?
I think it's helpful. I don't think it's absolutely required, but I find it very helpful when people make the link. They're like, I get it. I get myself now, right? So he was an FD at the time that I was coaching, and there was a CFO position opening, and everyone's like, go for it. And he's like, yeah. Like, he was quite passive about the whole thing. And so we went looking for like, where did this, and other areas he was passive as well, like not speaking up in meetings, letting things slide. But he would have clear thoughts about it, but he would just, like, no one would know about it because he just wouldn't express them.
Right.
And it came back to 15 years. He was a big football player as a kid. Age 15, the captain gets sick or hurts himself. So the adults say, well, you become, let's call him Bob. Bob, you become captain of the football team. And in the first match, it's a complete disaster, absolute disaster. And the adults who put him in the position then shamed him afterwards.
Right.
And said what a disaster, and what a disaster he was.
So rather than blaming the process, they blame the person.
His story is, from then on, he just stopped putting his head above the parapet.
Right. That shaped him very fundamentally then.
Because, like, why would you? And you're like, absolutely. Like, that was a smart survival strategy as a teenager. You're now a 40-year-old man wanting to go for CFO. Like, I'm not not to shame, but we can laugh at ourselves. Like, it's kept me safe, but I think I can let go of that one now.
Yeah, it's had its time.
Yeah, and so I think we all have versions of that. And for me, it was. I remember going home distinctly with a 95% in a maths test at high school, and my mother's like, "Well, what happened to the 5%?" She's got zero memory of this, right? But somewhere in there, the programming was, I need to perform at an extremely high level to be loved and accepted. So I do have very high standards and things. I still do, but I don't let them run me anymore. But I can see them taking over me sometimes.
And you can understand where it comes from.
And I can understand where it comes from. And I can kind of, give myself a little hug going, like, we're not 16 looking for your mother's approval anymore, right? But the echoes are still there. So yeah, you're right. I think all that, if you can understand and do some reflection around the culture, the family system, or early work experiences. Someone I worked with shared his first week in his first job, or first month, he'd gone away and done something that his manager had asked him to do, grizzly bear manager, he called him. He brings it back in the team setting to talk about it, and the guy just tears him apart. The shittest piece of work he's ever seen. What does he think he's doing? This is the guy's first month.
Wow.
He kept quiet for years after that. Years. So it could be your first, you could have had a great, that could be the formative place. We've all got experiences like that. Yeah. And at the time to survive, we brush them off when we say they're insignificant. And then, are they? They're probably
often not, are they?
Yeah, more significant than we're giving ourselves credit for. Yeah.
And the other thing we mentioned there as well, which was understanding, before we end up in that moment, understanding that, as you said, you can't read the label on the tin from inside the tin. It's just understanding that when you get into that situation, you're not going to be able to see it.
Yeah.
No matter how smart and how clever you are, nobody can crane their neck that far.
And it's not about smart. Like I want to underline that. This is not about being smart or not being smart.
And often, actually, I find it's more about connections. Are there people around you who you trust to tell you and that you will believe them when they say you're not okay? And one of the things I found that I actually found it on your website, linked from your website, is, what kind of a leader are you? Mm-hmm. Because I thought that was quite useful to be able to go, okay, what does my normal look like? What does my default look like? And I did that leader test of yours. What kind of leader are you? I was quite happy to say that mine came out as a coach. I was sort of relieved and felt validated by that. But the serious point in there is that if you understand where your strengths and where your behaviors naturally are, it is a bit of a clue as to where you tend to fall back to and default to and double down on when you're feeling under pressure, when you're triggered, when those emotional spikes are going on in your brain.
Yeah, I think that's, and I think the more time you spend in leadership, the more range you need to develop. I mean, that's the calling. I think that's what we all need, leaders with more range. And so whilst you might be a very democratic leader and look for people to bring everyone on board, COVID hits. Like, it's not time for a democratic leadership style, as an example. You have to make decisions. You're going to upset people. People need certainty. Yeah, I mean, that was a great, that experience was very interesting, watching people having to flex in their leadership style way outside their comfort zone because the context asked that of them. Around redundancies, you're a coach, your leadership style is a sort of coach style. And around redundancies, where you knew it 6 weeks before everyone else did, and you couldn't tell anyone about it. And people are saying, am I affected? And you know where they are and aren't, and you can't say it. Like, a lot of inner turmoil for you in those places, that time.
Yeah, people being forced well outside their comfort zone and having to lead with a non-native style. This is a wonderful tangent here, but I find something very similar with technical leaders, because there's this... the world of LLMs is upon us. Generative AI is all over the place. And as most technological fads come around, it's being touted as a solution to absolutely everything. It is the silver bullet, even though there is even a theory that says there's no silver bullet, and that's still holding true. But one of the things I see is that, we're not going to need employees, we're not going to need engineers, we're not going to need leaders relatively soon, because generative AI and general AI will be able to do all of this stuff for us. And I keep coming back to this exact point, is that we need this incredible breadth as people leaders, in terms of the skills, capabilities, and styles that we can put on and use, that no LLM is going to help us with, that no artificial intelligence is going to help us with, to figure out, what's the appropriate way of working and not have blockers in our way. This is work that needs to be done by people, for people, on exactly these kinds of things, to build this breadth. So yeah, bit of a hobby horse of mine, but
now you're triggering me, because the idea of AI, I think AI currently stands as a threat to coaching. And
why do you see it as a threat to coaching?
Because I think people don't really understand transformational coaching, and given that it's one of the top use cases for AI at the moment in the last year or something is using it as a therapy and a friend, using AI as therapy. And if you think that's good enough, if you haven't had anything else, then you think that's good enough. Then why would you work with a human coach? Because you don't understand that, the delta, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the threat for coaching. Our challenge in helping people understand the transformation and the real healing that happens through coaching.
Yeah, maybe I'm a bit more glass half full, but I sort of see it as, if people can get something, they'll see the value of the full package and the full way of doing things, and understand that an artificial proxy for something is still always going to be an artificial proxy for it, rather than being a replacement for the genuine, I've spent 20 years of my life figuring out how to do this stuff. I know it better than a general AI that's trained across however many trillions of data points that cover everything under the sun, from nuclear physics to biology. maybe that's just my different approach to it. I'm sort of thinking it's actually just going to expand the range and the exposure that people have to the concepts of coaching. And so therefore, I just look at it from the point of view of people are going to be more open to it when I start talking to them about here's the benefits of coaching. They go, okay, yeah, I get that.
I hope you're right for both our sakes.
Kind of betting that I am by default, aren't I suppose?
Me too. I don't have it in me to do another pivot at this age. It's like, yeah.
Talking about pivots, let's talk about how we can boil down all this wonderful discussion into sort of a playbook. So we're basically talking about how can we prepare ourselves before we get to one of these forced pivots in behavioral traits in leadership. And so we sort of said, step one is awareness. You sort of distilled it very, very neatly down to that. Can we figure out the patterns that trigger us and the behavior that we jump into from there? Number two, if we can figure out what the triggers are, we can begin to be more consciously aware of them. Number three was creating that distance, creating the space so that we can see the triggers for what they are. We can see our own reactions to them for what they are, and at least be ready for it. Step four is to be aware. Even though there's not a lot you can actually do about it, be aware that when you're in one of these situations, it looks very different from the outside than it does from the inside. You can't possibly see it from the inside. And I think if I was going to try and add my own step five onto that, Catherine, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but building that network of people, that group of people who you will listen to and build up the trust that when they say, hey, you could do with some help, you're not okay, that you will actually stop, listen, trust them when they get to that point. It'll mean that your what should we call it, the floor of how far down you need to go before you hit the reset button should be slightly shallower.
I think it's a great ad, Adam. I think I quite like the idea of having sort of board of directors. I don't mean official, but like people that you would have, people that you admire, respect, see you fairly frequently, whose advice you would listen to. 3 or 4 people like that in your life, who you've nominated. I mean, they know they're on the board, and so therefore they have permission to go, Adam, dude, we need to have a conversation. You're like, okay, I'm listening. Tell me. That they're actively, they're your wing people. They're actively on your side. You're tracking where you are, tracking what's going on for you. I think is a great addition. Your leadership is lonely, incredibly lonely. The more political the organization, the more alone you'll feel. The higher up you go, the less you can trust. The less people you feel you can trust. I'm not saying that's necessarily true.
And the fewer people that you can relate to, because the fewer people are in a similar or adjacent role to where you are that you can look at and recognize. Yes.
So building that kind of team of people, your board of directors, is a way of offsetting that, and you ending up in an echo chamber of yourself.
I love that phrase. Catherine, what a wonderful way to wrap up with a nice succinct way for us to try and prepare ourselves for the kitchen floor reset before it ever happens. Hopefully it never does, but reality is in leadership, the higher up you go, the higher the chances are that you're going to end up in this situation. It's been wonderful speaking to you, Catherine. Thanks so much. How can people get hold of you, get in touch with you?
It's been a delight, Adam. I love, I could spend hours talking about this as we can see from our time together. So the website is Conversations at the Edge.
We can put a link to that in the show notes.
Put a link to that in the notes, yeah. Also on LinkedIn. Conversations at the Edge, because I think well demonstrated in what we've been talking about. Like, these are edge of your awareness, edge of your comfort, edge of your areas of development. I think that's where the juicy stuff lies.
It's a great phrase and a great name. Catherine, thanks very much. We'll talk soon. And for those people who want to get in touch with you, we'll have the links below in the show notes. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you for listening to the whole episode. I appreciate your time. So just before you go, I'd like to ask you for a favor in return for putting together this episode of the CTO Playbook for you. Please share the episode with just one person who will appreciate it. Wherever you're listening, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or another platform, sharing the episode will help more CTOs find the podcast and enable me to create more great content. Remember that you can find more information on the CTOplaybook.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the CTO Playbook.